when Shen Tinglan pushed open the door to the top-floor conference room at Shengyu Group. The first thing he saw was the floor-to-ceiling window and the city skyline stretching beyond it. He glanced down at his suit cuffs, confirmed there were no wrinkles, and walked to take a seat at the conference table. The representative from Shengyu hadn't arrived yet. He opened the project documents he'd brought and pulled an old fountain pen from his breast pocket, preparing to mark key points. The pen had a vintage dark blue enamel finish. The edges of the cap had been worn pale by time, revealing the dull gold metal beneath. The clip bore a faint engraved outline, just barely recognizable as an L. The pen had been with him for over a decade. His grandfather had placed it in his trembling hand the day he received his college acceptance letter. Since then, it had been with him through papers, contracts, notes. Never far from his side. Before his grandfather passed, he'd only said, "This pen was left to me by an old friend. Someday, if you get the chance, return it to the person it belongs to." He'd asked who that person was. His grandfather had only shaken his head and said nothing. He never asked again. He just kept the pen with him. The conference room door opened again. Shen Tinglan looked up. A woman in a black suit walked in. Her pace wasn't fast, but every step carried an unmistakable presence. Her heels clicked steadily against the marble floor. She took the head seat and opened the file before her. Her gaze lifted from the paper, swept across the people at the table, and finally stopped on him. Liu Mingyue, CEO of Shengyu Group, a young, hands-on executive known in the business world for her drive. She'd taken over the family company at 26 and nearly tripled its size in 4 years. Shen Tinglan had done his homework before coming. He knew she was 30, single, and the subject of polarizing opinions. Some said she was too cold. Others said she just didn't pretend to be warm. When the meeting began, Shen Tinglan presented the core proposal. He spoke with focus, occasionally marking the margins of his document with the fountain pen. As he reached the third section, he turned a page, and the pen rested on the table for just a moment. Liu Mingyue's voice stopped. Shen Tinglan looked up, thinking he'd made a mistake in his presentation. The woman across the table had her gaze fixed on the pen beside his hand. Her entire posture had gone still. She leaned forward slightly from her usual relaxed position against the chair back, her fingertips pressed against the table, knuckles white. Shen Tinglan. Her voice was a degree lower than before. Ms. Lu, that pen by your right hand. She pointed in its direction, her gaze not leaving him. Pick it up. He blinked, then did as she said. Liu Mingyue rose from her chair, walked around the table, and stopped in front of him. Under the gaze of everyone in the room, she grabbed the hand holding the pen. The conference room went silent. Several Shengyu executives exchanged confused glances. Shen Tinglan's colleagues were also frozen. He looked down at Liu Mingyue's hand around his wrist. Her fingers were long and pale, but now the knuckles stood out white. Trembling slightly, she leaned in close to examine the worn L on the pen cap. Her eyes reddened. This pen. Her voice was trembling. Where did you get it? She was gripping his wrist, her fingers cold through his shirt cuff. He looked at her expression on the verge of tears, and suddenly remembered his grandfather's last words. He opened his mouth. This pen was left to me by my grandfather. His name was Shen Lishan. Liu Mingyue's grip on his wrist tightened sharply, then softened, as if afraid to break something. She looked down at the pen, her thumb brushing the worn engraving on the cap. Shen Lishan. She whispered the name, her voice barely audible. Then she looked up at him. The light caught the glistening in her eyes. This pen belonged to my father. When he passed, the pen was gone. I searched for it for years. The silence in the conference room stretched. Shen Tinglan looked at the woman known for her cold, near-ruthless composure. Now gripping his wrist, eyes red. And his grandfather's parting words crystallized in his mind. Return it to the person it belongs to. Ms. Lu, he said quietly, is the letter engraved on this pen? Liu Mingyue's lashes trembled. She looked down at the pen, her voice rough. My father's surname was Lu. He had this pen custom-made when he was 20. The cap was engraved with the initial of his surname. She raised her eyes to him. Before your grandfather passed, did he say anything else? Shen Tinglan met her shimmering eyes and repeated his grandfather's last words exactly. He said, this pen was left to me by an old friend. Someday, if you get the chance, return it to the person it belongs to. A tear fell silently from Liu Mingyue's eye, landing on the conference table in a small dark circle. She released his wrist, wiped the corner of her eye with the back of her finger, and straightened. Her voice had regained most of its composure, though the last syllable still trembled. Meeting adjourned. Shen Tinglan. Stay. The room filed out. When the door closed, Lu Mingyue stood with her back to him at the floor-to-ceiling window. Her shoulders rigid. Shen Tinglan didn't rush her. He looked down at the pen, realizing for the first time that it carried more weight than an old fountain pen should. After a long moment, Lu Mingyue turned. Her eyes were still red, but her expression had regained most of its calm. She walked back and sat across from him. How long have you had this pen? She asked. Since I started college. Almost 12 years now. And your grandfather? Shen Lishan, when did he pass? 8 years ago. She was silent for a moment, eyes lowered. When she looked up, her voice was steadier, but something soft still lingered in her eyes. That I was 18 when my father passed. He loved this pen more than anything. After he was gone, the pen was lost too. I searched for it a long time. She looked at the old pen on the table. I never expected to find it in someone else's keeping for over 30 years. Shen Tinglan picked up the pen and placed it in front of her. The enamel glowed softly in the warm light, the wear on its edges recording the passage of time. Ms. Lu, he said, this pen is yours now. I've done what my grandfather asked. Lu Mingyue looked at the pen returned to her. She reached out and touched the faded L. Her fingertip rested there for a long moment. Then she pulled her hand back and pushed the pen toward him. You keep it, she said. Shen Tinglan stared. But it's your father's. I know. She looked into his eyes. You've kept it safe for me all these years. Now you keep it yourself. She paused, her voice softening. I need someone to keep telling the story of this pen. Shen Tinglan looked at the CEO, still red-eyed, yet already planning the next move. And held the old pen he'd used for over a decade. His heartbeat was a mix of relief at fulfilling his grandfather's wish and something else stirred by her final words. Outside the conference room window, dusk was spreading across the edge of the city. Chapter 2. Shen Tinglan first saw the pen in his grandfather's study. He had just turned 18 and received his college admission letter. His grandfather spent the afternoon flipping through an old photo album in his wicker chair, sunset casting floating motes of gold through the dusty room. After dinner, his grandfather called him into the study. From the bottom drawer of the wooden desk, he retrieved a velvet pouch, untied the cord, and placed the dark blue enamel fountain pen in Shen Tinglan's palm. Tinglan. His grandfather squeezed his hand gently. That light, loose warmth unique to the elderly. Keep this pen. Use it for papers, contracts, journals. By the time it's worn, you'll know what makes it valuable. Shen Tinglan looked down at the pen. It was cool to the touch. A faded letter was engraved on the cap. Grandfather. What's engraved here? The initial of an old friend's surname. His grandfather leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes. Someday, if you get the chance, return it to the person it belongs to. His grandfather never mentioned the pen again. When Shen Tinglan started graduate school, he took the pen out in his dorm room. The nib was still smooth. It wrote perfectly when inked. He wrote a line to test it and found the barrel fit his hand more comfortably than any new pen, the kind of fit that comes from years of use. Later, his grandfather passed quietly. The night before, he'd told Shen Tinglan, work steadily. Don't forget the pen.at the time. Shen Tinglan thought he meant don't forget to practice your handwriting. Over the years, as he signed countless documents and took endless notes with that pen, he slowly understood the weight behind his grandfather's words. The pen wasn't his. He was just someone who'd kept it safe for over 30 years. Back in the conference room, after Lu Mingyue pushed the pen back to him, Shen Tinglan returned it to his breast pocket. Against his heart. Exactly as before, Lu Mingyue didn't speak. She just sat across from him, watching him put it away. Then she stood. Are you free tonight? He looked up. Yes. Let me take you to dinner. She picked up her phone, her voice mostly composed again, but the final note was a half-degree softer than a business greeting. Think of it as thanks for keeping my father's pen safe all these years. And if you want to hear the story, I can tell it. He followed her out of the conference room, down several hallways. As they passed offices, he caught glimpses of people looking up through the glass walls, watching the visiting representative being personally escorted by the CEO. He walked half a step behind her, catching the faint scent of her shampoo. She picked a restaurant tucked down a quiet alley a private dining room with warm lighting. After ordering, she set the menu aside, leaned back in her chair, and sipped tea. She was silent for a while before speaking. The year my father passed, I was 18. He had a heart attack in his office. By the time they got him to the hospital, it was too late. When I got there, he had nothing on him but half a pack of tissues and a fountain pen. She paused. That pen was lost later. I searched his study, his office, his car. Everything. I never found it. Shin Tinglan's fingers tightened around his teacup. Later, I heard from an old friend of his that he had a close friend named Shun. She looked up. I tried to find him back then, but information was incomplete. I never did. And then work got busier. But every year on his anniversary, I'd wonder, where did that pen end up? Shin Tinglan took the pen from his pocket and placed it on the table between them. The enamel glowed softly in the warm light. The L engraving was still clear. Ms. Lu, he said, before my grandfather passed, he told me this pen was left to him by an old friend. He only said an old friend. No name. I think he planned to return it to your father himself. But my father went too fast. She finished the sentence for him. She looked down at the pen on the table and touched its barrel lightly. How did your grandfather meet my father? Shin Tinglan thought for a moment. My grandfather was a craftsman. When he was young, he took custom pen orders. He mentioned that he made this pen himself. The enamel was layered by hand. The engraving was his work. He said the customer was delighted when he received it. They became friends after that. Lu Mingyue's fingers stilled on the pen. She lifted her eyes to him. Your grandfather made it. Yes. He was very skilled back then. He stopped as he got older. Shin Tinglan looked at her red-rimmed eyes. He kept that pen for over 30 years. He never used it once. She looked down at the old pen, her fingers pressing gently against it. After a long moment, she spoke. Shin Tinglan, what was your grandfather's name again? Shin Lishan. Li as in stand. Shan as in mountain. She was silent for a few seconds, then pulled out her phone and scrolled. She turned the screen toward him. It showed an old photo. Two young men standing in front of an old workshop, each holding a fountain pen toward the camera. One wore glasses and a blue work shirt, tall and lean, bearing a striking resemblance to Shin Tinglan. The other wore a white shirt with sleeves rolled to his forearms, smiling broadly at the camera. A pen identical to the one Shin Tinglan now held was clipped to his chest. Left is your grandfather, Lu Mingyue said, pulling the phone back. Right as my father. I found this last month going through old things. I'd never seen it before. On the back, she said, was written, for Mingyue's father. From Lishan. Shin Tinglan stared at the screen where the photo had been. His nose suddenly stung. He imagined his grandfather as a young man. Proud and smiling, holding that pen outside the workshop. And the man on the right that he'd never met him. But his granddaughter was sitting across from him now, holding the pen in the same way. Ms. Lu, he said, his voice slightly rough. Before my grandfather passed, he told me, tell Mingyue that her father was always proud of her. Lu Mingyue's eyes reddened sharply. She gripped the pen and looked down, her shoulder trembling slightly, but she made no sound. Shin Tinglan sat quietly across from her, watching her turn her face toward the wall. He heard her sniff, then straighten, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. How did your grandfather know my father was proud of me? Her voice was still rough. I don't know, he said, but he made a point of telling me that before he died. I think he must have heard it from your father. She held the pen and was silent for a long time. Her gaze fell on the L engraving, on the worn edges, on every detail marked by time. She carefully placed the pen back in front of him. You keep it, she said. You've used it for 10 years. It should stay with you. She looked up at him, warm light reflecting in her eyes. Shin Tinglan, your grandfather kept it safe for over 30 years. You brought it back. So stay. Stayed out. I need someone to keep telling the story of this pen. She lifted her teacup, took a sip, and set it down. The corner of her mouth curved. A faint, barely there arc. You keep the pen. Tell its story. I'll listen. He watched her set the cup down, watched her fingertip trace the rim. He put the pen back in his breast pocket. Outside the window, night had fallen. The city lights blurred behind the glass. He thought, I've used this pen to write my own story for 10 years. From now on, that story will include another name. Chapter 3. The next morning, Shin Tinglan received a personnel notice from Shengyu Group. He stood outside his old company, reading the stamped offer letter. Position, Special Assistant to the CEO. Department, Executive Office. Start date, immediate. He looked up at the Shengyu Tower across the street and remembered Lu Mingyue saying to him the night before, come in tomorrow. I'll have a position arranged. He'd thought it was just politeness. Shin Tinglan, a former colleague, passed by and clapped him on the shoulder. You got poached. Or did that CEO take a liking to you? He folded the letter and put it in his bag. He didn't answer. At 9:30 a.m. Badge in hand, he appeared on the 29th floor of Shengyu. The receptionist saw him and made a call. 3 seconds later, The executive office door opened, and Lu Mingyue walked out personally to bring him in. Your desk is in here. She pushed open the door to a small private office. By the window stood a brand-new desk with a new computer and stationery set. Through the window, he could see the same skyline as from her office, just angled a few degrees to the side, but with a clear view of her office door through the glass wall. That if you have questions, ask the assistant next door. For important matters, come directly to me. She stood beside his desk, coffee in hand, then turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she glanced back. I'll show you the cafeteria at noon. The door closed. Shun Tinglan sat in the new chair, spun once, and looked out at the layers of high rises and distant mountain ridges. He opened the computer and entered his credentials. When the screen lit up, the wallpaper was an old photo. Two men standing in front of a workshop, the same one from Lu Mingyue's phone that he stared at it. A smile tugged at his lips. News of the direct hire special assistant spread through the company like wildfire. In the break room, voices lowered. What's this new assistant's deal? He was with the other side yesterday. Now he's in the executive office. Heard Lu brought him in herself. Must be a connection. Shin Tinglan passed by the break room on his way to get water and caught the murmurs through the half-open door. He didn't stop, just carried his cup back to his office. The afternoon department meeting. Shin Tinglan sat at the end of the table taking notes. He was the only new face among the dozen people there. As he marked points with his old fountain pen, a marketing manager across the table laughed. Special Assistant Shin. I hear you're a direct hire. Where were you before? The question hung in the air. The words direct hire dragging just a little too long. Shin Tinglan looked up just as the conference room door opened. Lu Mingyue walked in, coffee in hand, clearly just passing by. She swept her gaze across the room and paused at the marketing manager, Manager Huang. What are you asking him that for? He froze, then laughed nervously. Nothing. Just getting to know the new colleague. Lu Mingyue didn't leave. She stood in the doorway, tilted her head toward Shin Tinglan, and spoke loud enough for the whole room to hear. Shin Tinglan is here because I invited him. If anyone has a problem with that, come talk to me. The room went silent for 3 seconds. Manager Huang looked down at his files. Others quietly returned to their materials. Lu Mingyue turned and walked away, her heels fading down the hallway. Shun Tinglan watched her go from the doorway. He looked down and continued taking notes. The scratch of his pen against paper was the only sound in the quiet room. The colleague next to him gave him a subtle thumbs up. That afternoon, he worked through several documents. The new system was unfamiliar. He fumbled through until nearly 8 p.m. When the sky outside darkened, he rubbed his sore neck and heard a soft knock at the door. Come in. The door opened. Lu Mingyue stood there, holding a takeout bag. She was wearing a light blue blouse, sleeves casually rolled up, hair loose over her shoulders, softer than during the day. She walked in and set the bag on his desk. The aroma of food escaped through the open top. First days, always rough. She leaned against his desk, looking down at him. He nodded. The system's different. The workflow too. Normal. She pushed the bag toward him. Eat first, then work. The cafeteria's closed. I ordered from downstairs. He opened it. Inside, tomato beef brisket rice and a side of vegetables. He looked from the food to her and laughed at a mess. Lu, do you do this for every new hire? She looked at him. In the desk lamplight, the corner of her mouth curved. You're the only new hire I've ever hired. She turned toward the door. At the threshold, she looked back. Take your time adjusting. I'll wait. The door closed. He stared at the steaming food for a moment, then picked up his chopsticks. The brisket was tender, the tomato broth sweet and tangy. After eating, the warmth spread through him. He cleaned up and went back to the system. Around 10 p.m., he stood to stretch. From the window, he could see that most of the building's lights were off. Except for the office diagonally across from his. Lu Mingyue sat at her desk, head bent, her profile traced by the desk lamp. He watched for a few seconds, then closed his computer, turned off his light, and left. As he passed her office, he hesitated, then knocked on the doorframe. She looked up. A mess. Lu, I'm heading out. He waved his badge. You should get some rest too. She looked at him. Ernest. Staying late on his first day. And her lips moved slightly. There's a client meeting at 10 tomorrow. You're with me. Okay. He turned to leave. Behind him, she said softly, be safe getting home. He didn't turn around, but the smile on his face stayed from the elevator to the lobby. When the night air hit him, he glanced down at his breast pocket. The tip of the pen's cap caught the streetlight in a dull gold gleam. He remembered, at lunch, when she'd shown him the cafeteria. She'd glanced at that same pocket. She didn't say anything, but the look was different from the one in the conference room. Then it was shock and rediscovery. Now it was a quiet, reassuring confirmation that it was still with him. He touched the pen clip, pressed it deeper into his pocket, and walked toward the subway. Behind him, the 29th floor window lights still glowed. Chapter 4. 2 weeks into his new job, Shin Tinglan had learned all of Lu Mingyue's habits. She arrived at 8:30 a.m. First thing, black coffee. She rarely went to the cafeteria for lunch. Her assistant brought food to her office. Her light stayed on as late as 11 p.m. Her posture while reviewing files never changed. Slightly leaning forward, right index finger running down each line. He'd also seen two sides of her. In meetings, her jaw was set, her voice measured, every word carrying finality. But in the evenings, when he passed her office and she looked up, the curve of her mouth was softer. Shin Tinglan. She called out tonight that he leaned against the doorframe and looked back. Warm lamplight fell behind her. She looked up at him, twirling a pin. A new one, not the old one in his pocket. Check the data on page 9 of the proposal for me, she said. I think the quarter-over-quarter growth calculation is off. He walked over and bent beside her desk to look. The gap between them shrank to less than half an arm's length. He caught the faint scent of her shampoo, the same as at the dinner. Her finger tapped a line of data. He followed and saw it. A missing quarter. It should accumulate from Q3. They used the Q2 baseline incorrectly. She turned her head to look at him. His lowered lashes and the line of his lips in the warm light. She made a note on the document, then leaned back in her chair. Good eye. He straightened. Comes with the job. I was a product manager. You miss a number. It's a disaster. Then you can check mine from now on. She put the pen back in its holder, glancing at the old pen in his pocket. One full review before I sign. I'll pay you extra. He smiled. Ms. Lu, you didn't have dinner again, did you? She paused. I did. What did you have? Tea egg. A single tea egg doesn't count as dinner. She was silent for a moment, then pulled out her phone and scrolled. That noodle place downstairs still delivering. He watched her rare moment of being caught off guard, took the phone from her hand, and scrolled himself. That one's closed. I know another one. Tomato beef brisket noodles. Same place as last time. He ordered on his own phone and set it down. 10 minutes. You fix page 9 first. It'll be ready when you finish. She watched him place the order, watched the tension in her jaw relax a fraction in the lamplight. She didn't answer, but turned back to her computer and made the fix. When the noodles arrived, she took a bite. The warm light caught the curve of her smile. Flickering, he sat across from her in the guest chair, flipping through a contract. The desk lamp illuminated the quiet space between them. The only sounds, the occasional page turn, the scratch of his pen, two adjacent towers exchanging night signals, AT 10.30. He rubbed his eyes and closed the folder. He stood and stretched. She was still bent over the desk. Time to go. Ms. Lu. She checked the clock, closed her laptop, and stood. As she passed him, she reached over and turned the thermostat up 2 degrees. Then she grabbed her coat. Let's go to the elevator. He realized he'd grown used to this rhythm. She worked late, so he did. A glance from her meant he'd order food. The click of her laptop closing was his signal to pack up. It was like a silent synchronization system. The elevator doors opened. He stepped aside to let her enter first. The polished walls reflected their two silhouettes. She was half a head shorter. Without heels. Her crown reached his chin. Shin Tinglan, she said. Yeah. What time do you get in tomorrow? 8:30. I'll take you to breakfast. She watched his reflection in the elevator wall. New kanji place across the street. Their pumpkin kanji is good. He watched her profile in the reflection. Are you taking me to breakfast? Or making sure I don't forget to eat again? She turned her head to look at him. The elevator reached the lobby with a ding. She stepped out first, took 2 steps, then looked back. Both. She turned toward the lobby exit. Her heels echoed in the empty space. A sound of being caught, yet refusing to admit it. He watched her for 2 seconds, then caught up. As they stepped through the revolving door, the night air hit. He looked down at their shadows stretching side by side on the pavement. Chapter 5. The next morning, at 8:30 sharp, he arrived at the kanji place across from the company. She was already sitting by the window. 2 white bowls of pumpkin kanji steamed between them. She was dressed more casually than usual. Cream knit top, dark trousers, hair loose over her shoulders. She waved when she saw him. He sat across from her, looking at the kanji. A thin layer of rice oil floated on top. The pumpkin's sweet fragrance mingled with the rice in the morning light. What time did you get here? Point 8.8. You came to the office at 8. Not the office. She took a slow sip. I came here to wait for you. His spoon paused midair. She saw it, and the corner of her mouth curved. Then she looked back down at her kanji. Morning light slanted through the window. Their table warmed. Someone murmured in the corner. The doorbell chimed with each new customer. Outside, sycamore leaves rustled in the wind. He held the warm bowl and felt all the late-night exhaustion of the past 2 weeks dissolved. Liu Mingwe, he said. She looked up. Last night you said, take your time adjusting. I think I've adjusted pretty well. Her grip on her spoon paused. She looked at him, morning light spilling over his shoulders, touching the curve of his smile. She looked down at her kanji, then set the spoon down, then started adjusting to something else. Like what? Like bringing me breakfast. Tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Same place. You get here first. I come later. You order and wait. He watched her stir her kanji, her ears faintly pink in the morning light. If it hadn't been so sharp, he might have missed it. Okay, he said. I'll wait for you. When she stood to leave, she paused beside his table. She set a peppermint candy beside his saucer. The wrapper caught the light in a bright flash identical to that first candy she'd left on the stairwell. Only then they hadn't really known each other that he closed his palm around the candy. The creases of the wrapper pressed against his fingertips. Warm. Solid. Chapter 6. At Monday morning's meeting, Shen Tinglan met Zhou Yan for the first time. He was the partner's representative. Early 30s. Well-built. Perfectly suited. When he shook Shen Tinglan's hand, he used a touch more pressure than necessary. Special Assistant Shen. I've heard a lot about you, the talent Ms. Liu personally recruited. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Zhou Yan was there for a joint promotional project. Duration roughly 2 months. After the meeting, he added Shen Tinglan on WhatsApp, saying it'd be easier for coordination. Shen Tinglan accepted without much thought, but from the next day, Zhou Yan's messages began to exceed normal work boundaries. Special Assistant Shen. Free for lunch. There's a new Western place. I booked a table. Afternoon tea. I brought snacks. Left them at the front desk. Shen Tinglan declined twice. The third time, Zhou Yan appeared on the 29th floor with 2 coffees. Smiling, and handed one to Shen Tinglan. Passing by. Got one for you too. Shen Tinglan took it, unsure how to refuse when the door of the adjacent office opened. Liu Mingwe walked out, empty coffee cup in hand. Her gaze swept over the coffee in his hand and Zhou Yan's proximity. She didn't say anything. She got her water and walked past them. But as she passed, she glanced at the cup. The shop's label was still on it. The Western restaurant Zhou Yan had mentioned that afternoon. Another message from Zhou Yan. Special Assistant Shen. Movie screening tomorrow night. I have an extra ticket. Before he could finish reading, there was a knock on his door. Liu Mingwe stood there, a folder in hand. Impromptu meeting. 3 o'clock. He glanced at the time. 3.3. You're with me. Her gaze flickered to his phone screen for a beat, just enough to catch the words Zhou Yan had sent. Then she turned and walked away. Her back was as straight as ever, but he noticed she was walking half a beat faster. At 3 p.m. He walked into the conference room. And found it empty except for her. She sat at the head of the table, reviewing a document completely unrelated to Zhou Yan's project. Ms. Liu, he said, sitting down. This meeting, cancelled. She closed the file and looked at him. But since you had the time, you can help me review this report. He looked at the report. Full of financial data, completely outside his expertise. He turned 2 pages, then set it down. Liu Mingwe, he said, are you trying to keep me from going to Zhou Yan's movie screening? Her hands stilled on the file. She looked up at him. The light defined her jaw. She was silent for 2 seconds. He asked you to a movie screening. He sent a message. I haven't replied yet. Then don't go. He looked at her. Why? She set down her pen, leaned back, and folded her hands on the table. The conference room was empty. The warm light settled around them. Because he's a man. Inviting you to dinner, coffee, movie screenings. That's not standard work protocol. She held his gaze. You're my assistant. Your schedule for today doesn't include external social activities. He watched her at the expression of stating policy, but saw something else in the white of her knuckles as she gripped her pen. He leaned forward, arms on the table, lowering his voice. Liu Mingwe, just say it. She looked at him. This silence was longer than usual, long enough that he thought he'd overstepped, and he was about to apologize. When she spoke, I'm jealous. 3 words. Blunt, unadorned, as straightforward as pulling a pin from her holder to sign a contract. He leaned back in his chair, watching her, A smile spread slowly across his face. He saw her jaw tighten further after she said it. But she didn't look away. So about the movie. Don't reply. The coffee he brought. I'll replace your office coffee machine tomorrow. I'll get the brand you like. And his WhatsApp. She looked at him. Delete him if you want. Or don't. She paused. But if he brings coffee again, I might adjust the front door access. He laughed. He leaned back in his chair and laughed for several seconds. Her ears flushed pink. But she didn't move. She just twirled her pen and set it down. Lu Minghua, he said, still smiling. You're better at this than at board meetings. She put the pen on the table. If you keep looking at me like that, I'm transferring you to accounting. Would you still be jealous? She stood and walked around the table, stopping in front of his chair. She looked down at him. Afternoon light filtered through the blinds, striping her face with gold. Yes, she said, but I don't need you to explain yourself to anyone. Just know that. She reached out and closed the report on the table, tapping the cover lightly with her fingertip. What's between you and me comes before everything else. He looked up at her silhouette backlit by the window. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out the old pen and set it on the table. The L caught the warm light and a dull gold gleamed. The guardianship of this pen, he said. Still mine. She looked at the pen, then at him. Without answering, she took the pen and wrote something in the corner of the report's cover. She handed it back. He looked down at her handwriting. Neat and crisp. Guardianship. Shen Tinglan. Owner. Lu Minghua. He put the pen away. Read the line twice. And looked up at her. Can the owner do one thing? What? Tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock. Don't be late. She looked at him. The curve of his smile touched with pale gold, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she glanced back. I won't be late. Just make sure my kanji isn't cold. The door closed. He sat alone in the empty conference room, looking at the lines she'd written. He held the pen in his palm, feeling its warmth from the afternoon sun. Outside, the light was shifting west, but the whole afternoon felt bright. He read the line again, then stood, picked up the report, and walked to his office. As he passed through the hallway, his phone buzzed. Zhou again. Special Assistant Shun. Have you decided about the screening? He stopped and typed. Thanks for the invite. I have plans tonight. He pocketed the phone and pushed open his office door. On his desk sat a new peppermint candy. Same clear wrapper as the one this morning. Beneath it, a note. Afternoon tea. Not from Zhou Yan. From me. Lu He unwrapped the candy, put it in his mouth, and tucked the note in his desk drawer. He folded the wrapper and placed it next to the pen. Chapter 7 Wednesday evening. Shen Tinglan worked until after 9. When he walked out of the building, it was raining. He checked his bag.no umbrella. The rain wasn't heavy, but showed no sign of stopping. He pulled his jacket over his head and made a run for it. The subway was less than half a mile away. By the time he got there, his jacket was soaked, hair plastered to his forehead. He sneezed several times on the train, rubbing his eyes. The next morning, he woke up with a raw throat, a stuffy nose, and a body that felt like lead. He checked his temperature. 99.7, low-grade fever. He hesitated for 2 seconds, then got up and got dressed. There was an important client video call that morning. He should be there by the time he arrived. He could feel his temperature climbing. He chugged hot water, forced himself to sit at his desk, and logged in. At 10 a.m. sharp, the call started. He kept his voice steady. But by the third sentence, it cracked. A client on the other end asked, Special Assistant Shun, are you coming down with something? He waved it off with a laugh. Halfway through, his vision started blurring. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His fingers felt stiff and numb as they typed. He gripped the desk to stand up, thinking he'd get more hot water from the break room. When his knees buckled, he caught himself on the desk corner just in time. He leaned there, eyes closed. Behind him, a door opened. Hands gripped his arms, steadying him. He opened his eyes to Lu Minghua's jaw set tight, her brow furrowed. You have a fever. Not a question. Low grade. I'm fine. Your hands are shaking. That's not fine. She didn't wait for his answer. She pulled him up, threw his arm over her shoulder, and half walked him toward the elevator. His legs gave out, so she took his full weight and guided him into the Lu Minghua. Don't talk. I in the garage. She helped him into the passenger seat of her car, then got behind the wheel. He leaned against the seat and watched her profile. Her jaw harder than in any meeting, her fingers white on the steering wheel. The rain started again as they pulled out. Wipers swept across the windshield. The car's warmth enveloped him. The call this morning. He rasped. The VP took over. She glanced at him. Stop talking. Lie still. At the hospital. She guided him through registration. The exam. The payment. Her expression grim through it all. When the nurse put in the 4, he flinched. She pressed a warm, steady hand over his other one. He leaned back against the bed and closed his eyes. He heard her pull up a chair, heard the rustle of pages turning. He drifted. When he opened his eyes, she was still there, a file open on her lap, pen moving across the page. The rain had stopped. Afternoon light came through the blinds, falling across her face. Liu Mingwe, he rasped. She set the file down immediately and pressed her hand to his forehead. Her cool fingers made him close his eyes. Fevers down a little. She pulled her hand back. Still low grade. How long have you been here? Not long. She sat back down, but her hand stayed on the edge of the bed. You slept about an hour. He looked at her on fine expression. And reached out to touch her fingers. She flinched slightly when his fingers met hers, then slowly relaxed, letting her hand rest over his. Liu Mingwe, he said softly. Stop being so fierce. She looked at his hand, pale from the 4, at his lips bloodless with fever. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before. Next time you feel unwell, can you just tell me earlier? He closed his eyes. You were worried. Silence. Then her voice, close to his ear, soft with exasperation. No kidding. He smiled as he fell asleep. When he woke, the 4 was empty. The nurse removed it and pressed cotton over the spot. Liu Mingwe stood by the window, talking to the doctor. He couldn't hear the words, just watched her nod, thank him, and walk back. She bent to hand him his jacket. Ready. You're taking 2 days off. No work. 2 days. I approve the leave. She watched him stand, slightly unsteady, and steadied him with a hand. You can take more if you need. As he walked out of the hospital lobby, the rain had stopped. The pavement was slick. She drove him home. When he got out, she rolled down her window. Shen Tinglan, he turned back. Bending to the window, she looked at him. Afternoon light caught her eyes, warming them to brown. Take your medicine first thing when you get up. The box labeled before meals. Don't mix them up. Okay. He went up, opened the bag, and found she'd sorted the pills into daily packets, each labeled before meals or after meals in her crisp handwriting. He sat on the couch and laughed at the little labels for a while, then took the pills as directed and lay down. The next day, he didn't go to work. Around 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. He opened it to find her standing there in casual clothes, holding an insulated bag. She walked in and set it on the table. White congee and 2 side dishes from the cafeteria. Light food. She scanned his living room, her gaze pausing on the pile of unfolded laundry on the couch. Then she looked away. He sat down to eat. She sat across from him and watched. After 2 spoonfuls, he looked up. Shouldn't you be at work? No morning meetings. So you came all this way just to bring congee. She leaned against the arm of the couch. And to make sure you took your medicine. She pointed at the row of packets on the coffee table. The top one. Labeled after lunch. Hasn't been opened. So I've confirmed it. You haven't eaten lunch. He looked at her. And set down the bowl. Liu Mingwe, you didn't sleep well last night either, did you? She paused. He leaned in and saw a faint shadow under her eyes. She looked away, stood, and packed the empty bowl into the bag. Take your medicine at lunch. I'll come back for the bowl this afternoon. At the door, he called after her. Don't come back this afternoon. I'll wash it myself. He walked over to her. Go home and rest. You're going to scare the clients with those bags under your eyes. She looked up at him, caught the smile on his face, and curved her own. Then stop looking at files at night. You're not recovered yet. Okay. She turned and left. After the door closed, he listened to her footsteps fade down the hall. He walked back, opened the lunch packet, and took the medicine. Later, scrolling through his phone, he saw a message in the company group chat. Ms. Liu came in late this morning, in casual clothes. Several people speculated. Is Ms. Liu seeing someone? He smiled, set the phone on his chest, and closed his eyes. Chapter 8. When Shen Tinglan returned to work after his recovery, he sensed a shift in the break room atmosphere. As he filled his water cup, 2 colleagues murmured in the corner. He caught half a sentence as he passed. That special assistant Shen. Direct hire. Office next to the CEO. She stays late with him every night. What do you think? They saw him and fell silent, pretending to talk about something else. He carried his cup back to his office, closed the door, and sat down. He turned 2 pages of a file, then closed it. He could guess the gossip. Direct hire assistant. The CEO's personal attention. Late nights. Put those pieces together, and they formed a certain picture. Some of it was true. He just didn't know which parts could be discussed, and which were meant to stay inside the door at the afternoon department meeting. The atmosphere was noticeably more charged. Shen Tinglan sat at the end, taking notes. A colleague who'd been at the company 2 years longer than him spoke with a casual, teasing tone. Special Assistant Shun, you and Ms. Liu must be really close. Some of us have been here years and never got a personal hospital escort. You just arrived and already got the treatment. What a coincidence that he drew out the word coincidence. Several people exchanged knowing glances. Shun Tinglin's grip on his pen tightened. Before he could speak, the conference room door opened and Lu Mingwe walked in. Coffee in hand, as naturally as before. She took the head seat and scanned the room, her gaze pausing on the colleague who'd spoken. Manager Wang. What did you just say? He laughed. Nothing. Just saying Special Assistant Shun and you have a connection. Connections aren't for gossip. Her tone wasn't harsh, but every word was clear. I know Shin Tinglin's workability better than you do. He earned his place here. Anyone with objections can come to me directly. No need for guessing games. The room went silent. Manager Wang looked down at his files, his smile fading. Lu Mingwe glanced briefly at Shin Tinglan, then looked away. After the meeting, he followed her into her office. The door closed. She stood with her back to him at the window. Lu Mingwe, he said. What they said, don't let it get to you. She turned, leaning against the window frame. Afternoon light streamed behind her, leaving her expression in silhouette. But her voice was steady. I don't let it get to me. What about you? Me? When you hear those things, does it make you feel? She paused. Like our relationship is something to be gossiped about. He looked at her silhouette against the window, stood, and walked to her. He stopped in front of her. The distance between them was less than half an arm's length. He could see the sky reflected in her eyes. When I heard those things, I was thinking the same thing you were thinking. He reached out and removed a loose thread from her shoulder. When you defended me in that meeting, I was standing behind you, watching, and I was thinking, after returning this pen, maybe I should stay too. She looked at him, light flooding from behind her, catching the smile at his lips. She held his gaze for a few seconds. When you stayed, was it because of the pen? Or because of me? He looked at her upturned face. So close, and didn't hesitate. The pen was the beginning. I stayed later because... He stepped forward, closing the last distance. He caught the familiar, faint floral scent of her hair. Because you're you? She looked up at him, her lashes trembling slightly in the backlight. When she spoke, her voice carried a barely concealed warmth. Then say it. Without the pen. He looked at her. Afternoon light moved slowly between them, falling on her shoulder, on the dull gold clip of the pen in his pocket. Because of you, he said. Lu Mingwe, I stayed because of you, not the pen. When you said you needed someone to keep telling the story, that you were talking about the pen. But every night you stayed late reviewing files, ordering noodles for me, shielding me from gossip, driving me to the hospital. None of that had anything to do with the pen. She looked into his eyes. A smile spread slowly across her face, deepening from shallow to full. Like the first time she'd seen the pen. But this time not for a lost object found. This time, for something she hadn't expected. Shin Tinglan. She reached out and touched the pen clip at his chest. When you said all that just now, the clip was outside your pocket. It heard everything. He looked down at his pocket, then back at her. Then it heard. You can ask it. She pulled her hand back, stepping half a step away, leaning against the window. Light flooded around her. She smiled, her eyes brighter than anything. I don't need to ask. It's been with you for 12 years. You've written thousands of words with it. It already knows what you're thinking. He looked at her. Leaning against the light, smiling at him. And smiled too. Then breakfast tomorrow. Same place. The kanji shop owner asked me last week. She said. He asked, Miss, are you and that young man dating? And what did you say? She looked at him, sunlight breaking into warm flecks in her eyes. I said not officially yet. I said I was waiting for him to finish returning the pen. He looked down at the pen in his pocket, then back at her. The pen is returned. She curved a smile. I know. Tomorrow's breakfast counts as the official first date. She turned and sat back at her desk, picking up a file to review. As if their conversation had been just a lunchtime chat. But he saw her pen pause 2 seconds before touching the paper. He saw the smile that never quite disappeared from the corner of her mouth. He turned to leave. As he passed her desk, he set a peppermint candy at its corner. The wrapper caught the afternoon light in a bright flash. Identical to every one she'd left on his desk. Only now the roles had reversed. As he walked out, he heard the faint crinkle of unwrapping behind him. He glanced through the crack in the door. She had put the candy in her mouth, her profile soft as she reviewed documents. He smiled and closed the door. Chapter 9. Shin Tinglan discovered the letter while cleaning out old belongings over the weekend. His grandfather's study had been preserved exactly as it was. Shen Tinglan went back occasionally to tidy up that dust the photo frames. Flipped through the old books. This time, as he cleared the bottom drawer of the desk, his fingers brushed against the edge of a manila envelope. It was tucked beneath a stack of old notebooks. The flap was sealed with paste. No stamp, no address. Only a few words written on the front, Tio Mingyue, and her father. His hand stilled. He sat on the floor and turned the envelope over several times, confirming it was his grandfather's handwriting. He hesitated for a moment. Then he broke the seal. The paper was yellowed. The edges brittle. His grandfather's handwriting was stronger than in his later years, still carrying the sharp precision of the craftsman he'd once been. Shen Tinglan smoothed it flat on his knee and read, Mingyue, I've been writing this letter for years and never mailed it. When your father passed, I couldn't make it to see him one last time. That remains one of the greatest regrets of my life. We had planned to see the autumn leaves in the mountains that year. He never made it to autumn, and I never kept the promise. The fountain pen I promised to keep safe for him. I've held on to it all this time. I thought I'd return it to you one day, but every time I picked up my pen to write, I set it down again. I always felt I owed too much to say it all. Shen Tinglan's thumb traced the edge of the paper. His grandfather's handwriting grew more rushed in the middle, as if written late at night. That I saw you once when you were little. Your father brought you to the workshop. You wore a red dress and sat on the doorstep eating candied fruit. I gave you a small pen. You said, I want Daddy to engrave an L on it for me too. You were 3 or 4 that I can't quite remember. But I remember your father saying, Mingyue will inherit my pen one day. His eyes were bright when he said it. Shen Tinglan turned the page. At the end, his grandfather's handwriting became careful and deliberate again. As if he'd mulled over every word. I'm old now. Near the end, the only thing I still can't let go of is this pen and your father's unfinished words. Before he passed, we spoke once on the phone. He talked a lot that day. At the end, he said, his greatest pride in life was having a daughter named Mingyue. I kept those words for him for over 20 years. Now I'm writing them down for you. Consider this an old debt settled. The signature was his grandfather's customary closing, Lishan. In remembrance, Shen Tinglan held the letter, sitting on the floor. The paper glowed warm yellow in the afternoon light. He looked at the pen in his breast pocket, then at the line. His greatest pride in life was having a daughter named Mingyue. He folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. The next Monday, he arrived early. He kept the letter in his desk drawer all morning, wondering how to give it to her. At lunch, he knocked on her office door. She was reviewing documents, looked up, and saw the manila envelope in his hand. She set down her pen. What is it? He walked over and placed the envelope on her desk. I found this over the weekend. It's from my grandfather. He meant to send it, but he never did. She looked at the envelope, the words to Mingyue and her father. For a long time. Then she opened it, slid out the letter, and began to read. He stood beside her, watching her read, watching her fingertips press gently on the paper's edges to keep it from tearing. Watching her lashes tremble slightly as she reached the middle, she finished. She placed the letter back in the envelope and looked up at him. Her eyes were red, but no tears fell. The light caught the glistening. Your grandfather wrote this, she said, her voice a little rough. In his last years he wrote about you in the red dress. He said your father told him you'd inherit his pen. She looked at the envelope on the desk, touched its worn edge. Did your grandfather ever say anything else? He walked to the edge of her desk, pulled the pen from his pocket, and set it before her. The dark blue enamel glowed in the afternoon light. The L on the cap was burnished dark from decades of touch, he said. Shen Tinglan began, holding her gaze. Tell Mingyue her father was always proud of her. She gripped the pen. Her head lowered. Afternoon light caught the stray wisps of her hair. He saw her shoulder tremble. Then she looked up, and the tear finally fell, landing on the desk. He didn't speak. He just moved the stack of files aside and pushed a box of tissues within reach. She pulled one out, pressed it to the corner of her eye, sniffed, and looked at him. Shen Tinglan. Her voice was still nasal, but steady. Your grandfather returned the pen to me. You delivered it. So what about you? She held the pen, looking at him. The moisture in her eyes had faded, but her gaze was fixed. You said you stayed because of me. What now? The pen's debt is paid. Do you stay or go? He looked at her red-eyed, holding her father's pen, looking up at him with unwavering intensity. He reached out, took the pen from her hand, and placed it in his breast pocket. The pen is returned, he said, but I'm taking it back. She watched him put it away. What does that mean? This pen's story isn't finished. You said you needed someone to keep telling it. Your father's pride that you're still carrying it. I'm staying to watch over those things. He leaned over, took the envelope from her desk, folded it, and placed it back before her. Keep this too. It's the period my grandfather owed your father. I'm placing it for him. She watched him do all this. Then she looked at the envelope on her desk and was silent for a long moment. When she looked up, a slow smile curved at her lips. Shen Tinglan, your grandfather probably already knew. You'd return the debt, and then leave a debt of your own. He leaned against her desk. How do you know? Because he wrote it. She took out the letter and turned to the last page. Under the signature, another line. Fainter. In pencil. Had been added later. Let Tinglan return it for me. He's better at staying than I am. He froze. On the floor of his grandfather's study. Because of the angle of the light, the bottom of the last page had been folded under. He hadn't seen it. He leaned in to look. It was indeed his grandfather's later handwriting. Lighter. Softer. With the slight tremor of age. When did he write this? I don't know. She folded the letter back into the envelope and looked up at him. But he wrote it. He said you're better at staying. He leaned against her desk, looking down at his breast pocket. The pen lay quiet. The L aligned with his heart. He felt his grandfather laugh somewhere he couldn't see. Lu Mingwe. He said, yet I'm staying. He met her eyes. You can see that. My grandfather approves. She placed the envelope in the top drawer of her desk and locked it. She looked up at him. Afternoon light warming the space between them. I saw. She said. His pencil line. I've kept it. He pushed off from her desk and took 2 steps toward the door. He looked back. Tomorrow morning. Same place. 8 o'clock. You ordered. As he walked out, he heard the sound of her opening a file. And, just beneath the rustle of paper, a very soft laugh. He glanced through the crack in the door. She was looking down at the file, but her hand had drawn a small, crooked smiley face on the page. He smiled and closed the door. The pen in his pocket caught the corridor light in a dull gold gleam. He thought, Grandfather, maybe you were right. I am better at staying, because I've made it to the last step. He'd returned the pen to the right person, and he'd stayed. Chapter 10. Lu Mingyue's birthday fell in November. She told no one. She held meetings as usual, reviewed documents, met with clients in the afternoon, and worked until after 8 in the evening. Shen Tinglan noticed there was no cake on her desk. No flowers, just a gift box her assistant had brought in that afternoon, sitting unopened in the corner. Before leaving, he knocked on her doorframe. Lu Mingwe, it's your birthday today? She looked up, mildly surprised. How did you know? Your assistant brought a gift box in this afternoon. There was a happy birthday sticker on it. He leaned against the doorframe. So you're spending it alone? I'm used to it. She looked back down at her papers. My mom called this morning. My assistant sent a gift. That's enough. He didn't leave. He stood in the doorway for 2 seconds, then said, wait for me. He came back 20 minutes later, carrying a small box from the bakery downstairs. A palm-sized cake, tied with a pale pink ribbon. He placed it on the corner of her desk. They only had this size left. I'll get a bigger one tomorrow. She looked at the cake box with its pink ribbon, then up at him. The desk lamp softened his edges. He stood with hands in his pockets, carrying a smile. This was the best I could do on short notice. Candles? She asked. He blinked. He'd forgotten. He turned to go find some, but she stopped him. Don't bother. She pulled the old fountain pen from her pen holder. The one from his pocket. Unscrewed the cap and touched the nib lightly to a sticky note on her desk. She drew a small, crooked star. This counts as a candle. He watched her draw a star with the pen that had been with him for over a decade, and sat down across from her. Blow it out. She bent her head and blew gently at the inked star. Then she looked up. I made my wish. Will you share the cake? He opened the box. A small slice of Black Forest. He divided it in 2 and set them between them on a folder. She picked up a plastic fork, took a bite, and mumbled, sweet. She hadn't gone out tonight. But he noticed a half-empty glass of wine at her desk corner. She ate a few bites, then sipped the wine. A faint lip print marked the rim. It's your birthday. You didn't call friends? I don't have many, she said. A few are out of town. Didn't want to make a fuss. She set the glass down, turning it by its stem. My dad used to make me long life noodles on my birthday. After he passed, no one did that. He watched her turn the glass, the lamp stretching the shadows under her eyes. He took the wine glass from her and set a cup of hot milk in its place. He'd bought it downstairs on the way back. Wine gives you a headache, he said. She looked at the milk. Steam rose in the lamplight. She took a sip. The warmth spread from her throat to her stomach. When she set the cup down, she said, Shen Tinglan, There was one line in your grandfather's letter I read over and over, which one? Where he said his greatest pride in life was having a daughter named Mingyue. She leaned back in her chair, her voice softer. When my father passed, I was studying out of town. By the time I got back, he was already gone. I never heard him say those words. That he watched her fingers pale against the milk cup. He reached out, took the sticky note with the inked star, and placed it inside the cover of his notebook. That you've heard them now. He said them. My grandfather passed them on. We both heard them. She watched him tuck the note away, said nothing, and finished the milk. When she set the cup down, her fingers lingered on the rim. Outside, the night had deepened. The lamp pooled around them. That he stood and gathered the cake box. I'll drive you home. You drank tonight. She didn't argue. She grabbed her coat and followed him out. In the elevator, just the two of them. Their reflections stood side by side in the polished walls. She was quieter than usual, leaning against the wall, a strand of hair fallen loose. In the garage, she didn't go to her own car. She walked straight to his. He blinked, then opened the passenger door for her. He got in and started the engine. The car was quiet for a while, save for the heaters. Lu Mingyue, he said. The wine tonight. Was it because you missed home? Or something else? She turned to him. Streetlights slid across her face. Her voice was clear in the quiet car. Because someone remembered my birthday. I didn't have to spend it alone. His grip on the steering wheel tightened. At a red light, he turned to look at her. The car went dark. Streetlight caught her eyes. Soft, touched by the wine. From now on, he said, someone will always remember. She looked at him, her smile surfacing in the dim light. She didn't answer, but she reached over and rested her hand on his. The one on the gear shift. Her fingers settled lightly. He looked down at her hand, then turned his to hold it. Outside, city lights flowed like a river of stars. No more words passed between them, but their joined hands held warmth in the alternating glow of streetlights and darkness. Like two neighboring bell towers finally ringing the same chime. Her building. He stopped and turned to her. She didn't rush to unbuckle. She looked back at him. Shen Tinglan, you said tonight that someone would always remember. You meant it, right? Yes. She let go of the seatbelt, her hand still resting on his. Promises have to be kept. Have I ever broken one? She looked at him. Streetlight filtering through the window, catching her eyes. The wish I made tonight. You just fulfilled part of it. What did you wish for? She pushed open the door and stepped out. She bent to the window, her hair blowing across her face, and curved a smile. I wish that next year at the same time, same place, that you'd still be sitting across from me, eating cake. He watched her through the window, saw her turn toward her building. She took a few steps, looked back, then disappeared inside. He looked down at his hand, still holding the warmth of hers. He pulled out his phone and sent a message. Just before midnight. Happy birthday, Lu Mingyue. See you at the kanji place tomorrow. A reply came. Got it. See you there. The screen glowed in his palm, then dimmed. He started the engine and pulled into the night. Streetlights slid across the windshield. He glanced down at the pen in his pocket, its clip gleaming dull gold in the dashboard light. Tonight, he hadn't brought candles, but she'd drawn a star with that old pen, and that star was now in his notebook. On the first page, the first period drawn by his grandfather's pen, given to her, and to him. Chapter 11. 3 months later, Shen Tinglan moved his belongings into the corner of Lu Mingyue's study. Specifically, he brought an old book box. A lifetime's worth of possessions. And placed it by the window where a second-hand wooden shelf just fit. He'd had the old fountain pen professionally mounted in a slim black glass case and placed it on the highest shelf. Beside it stood an old photograph, his grandfather and her father in front of the workshop, the frame wiped spotless. You put it up so high, she said, looking up at the glass case from below, her eyes curving. High so it won't get knocked down. He stood behind her, reaching up to adjust the case's position. This pen stays here now. You can see it just by looking up. She turned to face him. Afternoon light filtered through the ginkgo tree outside, scattering gold across the floor. She wore a soft gray sweater, hair loose. Nothing like the sharp CEO she was at work. What about your pen? She asked. He glanced down at his chest. The old pen was now in the glass case. In its place in his pocket was a new one. Dark forest green enamel, engraved with 2 letters. LX. He took it out and placed it in her palm. I had it custom made. I asked what color you liked. You said forest green. She looked at the new pen. The green enamel glowed softly in the light. The engraving was clean and precise. A small space between the 2 letters. Who made it? One of my grandfather's apprentices. He took custom orders after he retired. He watched her turn the pen in her hands. The L is for you. The X is for me. The space is for whatever else we add later. She tried the grip that the barrel curved to fit her fingers exactly, as if measured. When did you take my measurements? She asked. You fell asleep at your desk once. I took a rough measure of your grip. She held the new pen, turning it in the light. Without handing it back, she turned to her desk, picked it up, and wrote a line on a blank sticky note. She folded it and placed it in his pocket that he unfolded it. Her handwriting, the space between L and X. Let's keep it open for. He read it twice, folded it back, and put it away. Then he dropped to one knee. She blinked, looking down at him on her study floor. He looked up at her with something different in his eyes, not the look he'd had in meetings, not the late-night takeout look, not the one he'd had when returning the pen. This was something that had started to grow then and was now fully bloomed. From his other pocket, he pulled out a small box. Inside, a simple silver band. Inside the band, a tiny engraving. Debt paid, not leaving. She looked at the ring for a long time. Then she reached out and placed the new green pin in the box. Beside the ring, Shen Tinglan. She looked down at him. Your grandfather told you to return the pen. You did. He looked up at her. Afternoon light flooding around her, catching her in a warm glow. And I'm leaving myself here. She bent and took the ring from the box herself, slipping it onto her finger. The silver gleamed quietly in the light. Then she picked up the green pen and placed it back in his palm. You keep this one. I'll use this from now on. The old one stays there. She tilted her chin toward the glass case. The new one stays here. She pulled him up from the floor. He stepped forward, closing the distance to a hug. Afternoon sunlight painted everything warm. The old pen in its case, the new green pen on the desk, the silver ring on her hand. Lu Mingwe, he said, looking down at her. You put the ring on? Yes. What will people at work say? Let them see. She looked up, smiling. I wasn't planning to hide it anyway. He leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead, light as a pen pausing before its first stroke. Then he straightened, glancing at the old pen in its case and the new one on the desk. One old, one new, half an arm's length apart, like two windows opened by the same breeze. That evening, she sat at her desk reviewing documents with the new green pen. He sat on the couch reading, occasionally looking up at her grip, just as he'd measured it, fingers resting slightly lower on the barrel. He closed his book and walked over. She was reviewing an internal memo draft. At the signature line, she'd already signed Lu Mingwe, the final stroke sharp and clean. In the margin, she'd added, special thanks to Special Assistant Shen Tinglan. He bent over and wrote 2 words beside her line. Spouse. She glanced at him, then drew a line under his addition. You just annotated my memo, she said. He straightened, leaning against her desk. Let the whole company know. She set down the pen and leaned back, looking up at him. The lamp cast their overlapping shadows on the bookshelf behind her, falling beside the glass case, wrapping the old pen's reflection together with the new green pen's silhouette. Outside, the night was deep. The warm light held a small, quiet world. On the highest shelf, the old dark blue pen glowed with a soft, time-worn luster. On the desk, the new green pen was held by its owner, and on the page, the word, spouse, had dried dark and steady, signed into effect forever. Chapter 12. Afternoon light shifted in the study, sliding from the edge of the bookshelf to the corner of the desk. Shen Tinglan leaned against the desk, watching Lu Mingwe uncap the new green pen and add a line beside where he'd written, spouse, second desk drawer. Key is yours. She looked up. You saw that? Second drawer. The one with your old pen's rubbing. I returned the pen, but I kept the rubbing. He looked at her words, following her grip. The warmth of her skin in the light. The fingers curved perfectly around the barrel. The tiny mole on the side of her neck just visible above her collar. When did you make the rubbing? The day you moved your book box. While you went down for the second trip. I pressed paper over it. She spun the pen and capped it. The nib marks were beautiful. I kept it as a memento. He reached out and folded her hand. The one holding the new pen. Into his. He looked at the ring on her finger. The engraving inside just visible in the light. Debt paid, not leaving. Lu Mingwe, he said. You've taken one old pen and one new one. Your pen case is full. She looked up. So, when the case is full, put something else in it. He looked into her eyes, warm in the afternoon light. Put the sticky note between the books. Put the star you drew with the old pen. Put the line about the second drawer key. Put everything you've written and folded and tucked into my pocket. She looked at him, the new green pen still in his grip. The LX engraving caught a sliver of light. She smiled, pulled the pen free, and uncapped it to write a line on his palm. The ink left a cool trail across his skin. He looked down. On his palm. Second drawer key is now yours. You have full rights to review everything you've left here. She capped the pen and placed it back in the holder with the others. Standing quietly in the light, he looked at the ink on his palm. Still wet. She'd paused slightly on the last stroke. The final tail of the character was slightly thicker. Is this ink waterproof? He asked. No. Wash your hands, and it's gone. Then I won't. He closed his fist around the words and walked back to the couch, pulling out his phone to take a picture of his palm. She watched him and looked back down at her documents, the smile on her face vivid in the lamplight. That evening, they walked to the kanji place. The owner already knew them when they walked in. She pointed to their usual table. Saved your spot. When the kanji came, she added a small side dish. On the house, Lu Mingweb bent over her bowl. Shin Tinglan took her phone from the table and unlocked it with his fingerprint. She'd somehow already added it without him knowing. He changed the wallpaper to the photo he'd just taken. The line on his palm was clearly visible in the warm kanji shop light. She took the phone back, glanced at it, locked it, and returned it to the table. She said nothing, but she took a second spoonful of kanji, and the clink of spoon against bowl carried a smile unlike any from the conference room. Outside, sycamore leaves rustled in the evening wind. Late November had turned cold, but the kanji was still hot. A thin layer of rice oil on top that broke at the touch of a spoon. Steam rose between them. He washed her lower lashes. Her nose flushed pink from the steam. He thought of the last time his grandfather had placed the old pen in his hand. Someday, if you get the chance, return it to the person it belongs to. For nearly a decade, he'd carried that pen through papers, jobs, moves, goodbyes. Until that afternoon, he placed it before her. He'd thought that was the end. But now he sat in the kanji shop, his palm still holding the ink. And she looked up from her bowl. Same time tomorrow, she asked. He looked at his palm. The ink had faded, but the words were still readable. He closed his hand and looked up. Yes. She stood to pay. As she passed him, she gave his shoulder a light tap, like brushing off a speck of dust. But through his jacket, he felt the warmth of her fingers in that half second. The bell above the shop door chimed. The owner waved from behind the counter. He followed her out into the cold evening air. He looked at the ink on his palm, now dry, the strokes less distinct, but he remembered the shape of every line. The way the final stroke was slightly thicker, the way she'd paused on that last character, the mark of ink left on his hand. He caught up to her. They walked side by side under the streetlights, their shadows stretching long, heads close together, ends indistinguishable in the sycamore shadows. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. A message from her, sent while he was right beside her. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. usual table. Don't be late. He glanced at her. She was walking ahead, hair lifting in the wind, the curve of her smile visible under the streetlight. He put his phone away and stepped forward to walk on her left side. The outside, the one that shielded her from the wind. The lingering coolness of ink still touched his palm. He thought, the pen is returned, but the words written with it. I'll keep collecting them, starting tomorrow morning.